and welcome to Kirklees Local Television's Weekly Wind-Up, a review of news from the Kirklees borough. We aim to be informative, interesting, amusing and provocative. My name is Kyle Warwick, and this week my guests are Pastor Carlton Napier, Reverend Patrick Price and Donovan Christopher. This week we begin by expressing our condolences to the family of Nelson Mandela. Mr. Mandela affected many lives within South Africa and all around the world and will be sorely missed. First, I'd like to start by asking Pastor Napier, how would you sort of describe Mr. Mandela's leadership in South Africa?
Well, yesterday I sat glued to my sofa watching the entire memorial service because Mandela meant so much to me. And there are three things that I've drawn from him basically as a pastor and as a human being. One, it's his great leadership skills. Two, his ability to reconcile a whole country and the world. And thirdly, this man stands up for nothing else but for justice across the whole globe. So for me as an African Caribbean descent person, massive thank you to a man that has done an enormous job.
Absolutely, yeah, that's great. Donovan, how would you sort of sum up the impact of the man here in Britain?
I mean, Nelson Mandela, for us as a generation growing up in Britain, around his prison sentence, it was an atrocity for us growing up as teenagers. We could never understand why he was actually locked up. When we started putting the pictures together and started joining the dots, we realised how powerful this man was and the atrocities that was happening in South Africa. But as far as his respect is in England amongst the African Caribbean community, I think his respect is very high. It gives us all something to aim for, and even through a struggle, Mandela is your arrow, your point head where you can lead forward from.
Absolutely, yeah, I think you can sort of see that within some of the sort of almost celebrations in Britain, in sort of London and the Leeds area, the sort of almost memorial sites for Mandela that sort of became celebration points.
He faced a struggle. He faced a struggle that he came through, and it just shows you, look, you can achieve, even in the face of fire and adversity.
Absolutely.
And that's what we have to take on board.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Reverend Patrick, what would you say would be, I mean, it's quite easy for us to see the sort of legacy of Mandela for people within the African descent community, especially sort of within South Africa, but the world over as well. But maybe it's a little bit more difficult to see what his legacy will be for people outside of the African descent community within Britain. So how do you feel his life will be seen in that sort of grouping?
Yes, just to concur with the other two speakers, that a tremendous statesman of our time, and certainly an icon for civil leadership for us all to look to and benefit from. And as you mentioned, legacy. Legacy is a byproduct and automatically manifested from his leadership and his what he's done for humanity. However, legacy is something that the recipient has to really decide to benefit from. The legacy is there. As a church minister, our ethos is the gospel of Christ, which is in one sense a legacy. But then it's the decision-making of the recipients concerning the legacy that's been left. So where Nelson Mandela is concerned, tremendous legacies. We can look into the finer details of what he's achieved. But of course, it depends on us who are the recipients of that legacy, on how we actually benefit from it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, from where I come from, I'm sort of the education system within England. It's not something that is massively focused upon, but is that something that we could do better within England in sort of the education system?
Yeah. In direct answer to that question, which I think is so important, the legacy and how it will impact non-Africans, which is very important. Nelson Mandela, as far as I'm concerned, united the world, not just Africa. And I was very proud yesterday to see among the dignitaries so many non-black faces that came to pay their respect. He has done tremendously to bring everybody together. And whether we're black, whether we're white, or in between, the legacy is straight. Racism is not an option. Hate, nobody was born that way. We can use some of his statement, we can use his lifestyle, which is the greatest legacy, to turn this world around.
Do you feel there's sort of a level of ignorance amongst sort of Britain as a whole, and a sort of ignoring of England's and Britain's role in the sort of bringing about of apartheid in South Africa?
Yeah, as I said, referring to my earlier statement in terms of, growing up under Mandela actually being in prison and the regime that was ruling in South Africa, and we're living in Britain here, Great Britain, so to speak. We would have expected the authorities and the government and the powers that be that run England to have done a lot more to remove him from incarceration a lot earlier. And my personal view is they still owe him 27 years. That's my own personal view. They still owe him 27 years of his life.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, a lot of my sort of understanding of apartheid within South Africa comes at my surprise at how long it sort of lasted into the 20th century, really, and was brought to my knowledge with a documentary about a cricketer called Basil de Oliveira, who was not allowed by the South African authorities to go and play cricket in South Africa, and it's sort of something I didn't realise had dragged on so long and something that really I think our education system should be doing more to bring to light, because it's I think education is the key to stopping the same things happening again in the future, really. I don't know whether... And
I think young people, just in innocence, we see things, young people see things, and if they're not taught about these things, they come up with their own assumptions and ideologies of these issues. And as me and my friends was reasoning a few days ago, with the apartheid system in South Africa, we wasn't being taught nothing about it in school. So resentment was setting in. Resentment sets in. We don't know. We've got to do our own research and reason with people who may be more in the know of what is exactly happening there. So education, as far as I'm concerned, is uttermost, it's got to be delivered around issues that we know nothing of.
And what's your feeling on that, Reverend?
Yes, similar in the sense that it appears that over the years, growing up over the years and acknowledging how information is cascaded down or presented, our knowledge of the atrocities, of the injustices of countries like South Africa was never really in the forefront, and it does sort of paint a sort of a politically correct picture that as long as it seems to be acceptable to not say anything, then nothing's said. But as soon as the subject becomes hot topic, it seems to be politically correct, to join the bandwagon to do something about it. So I do believe that there is a strong case for those who want to speak out to speak out and to not be subdued, in their assessment on what's happening, because it's out of those observations that the true picture is sometimes painted.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Right, well, that's sort of really touched on a few things, and once again, everybody at KLTV would like to pass on the condolences to the Mandela family. We're going to take a short break now. If you'd like to comment on anything you've heard so far on the Weekly Wind-Up, you can contact Kirklees Local Television by email on info@kirkleeslocaltv.com and through Twitter @Kirklees Local TV. We'll be back after the break.
Passing of Nelson Mandela was a sad day for all who have a heart. And to be fair, when people say angels walk the land, and we will never see another man like Mandela in our time. And there are so many lessons to be learned from where he started to where he finished, and it's out there for all to see. And I think even as black people, we should really take that to heart and become Nelson Mandelas ourselves and fight for those justices and equalities that we all crave for everybody. But Madiba, God bless, enough respect, and again, he's a light to the world. That's a special man. We're not going to see that again in our time.
For me, Mandela was a true inspiration, the way he brought unity not only within his country, but around the world as well. For someone of my generation, he is, for me, the first person that broke that barrier of inequality and has set an example to follow, really.
Nelson Mandela, fantastic, tremendous, a statesman of our time. To see Barack Obama, Fidel Castro on the same stage, who else could have brought this to pass? And I think that is symbolic of the effect that he has upon us all in this time. And I think we can benefit from that. I have oppositions, you have oppositions, but I think we can all benefit from that mutual ground, that mutual middle ground of respect, which is the beginning of future harmony and future peace.
And welcome back. This is Kirklees Local Television's Weekly Wind-Up. This week my guests are Pastor Carlton Napier, Reverend Patrick Price and Donovan Christopher. For this second part we're going to be posing some discussion a little bit about Chancellor George Osborne's autumn statement, and following that the sort of proposed 11% pay rise for MPs. A few points that came out of the Chancellor's autumn statement were the increasing of the state pension age and the announcement of a further £1 billion worth of cuts each year for the next 3 years. My first question, pose this to you, Reverend, is whether you think local MPs can seriously consider taking an 11% pay rise, considering that so many of their electorate and voters are suffering due to the cutbacks to local government.
Well, you can never justify imbalances in pay increase when we look at the climate, the economic climate that we're in. These things can never be justified. I would imagine there will be some sort of clever explanation, some sort of polished answer as to how it's come about, in as far as they themselves didn't set the pay increase. It was an outside body. But then what does spring to mind is the outside body that did set the figures could possibly be from the old school time, where Jobs for the Boys and all of that, an old boys network. So, to look at it in its true light, very unfair, very, very unfair. And, not that they wouldn't deserve 11% pay rise. However, if that is seen as a necessity and a need, then there is the best part of 70 million people in this country who also have similar need. So that's really my take on that.
Absolutely, yeah. I had a comment the other day that a sort of this recommendation of an 11% pay rise will sort of split MPs into those in areas that are wealthy, that it isn't particularly an issue for their constituents, and MPs in less wealthy areas who their constituents will take into mind them taking that pay increase a lot more. So it'll sort of split those MPs almost into those who can take it and those who will have to at least act like they don't want to take it. Is that something that you can sort of can see happening?
Yes, most definitely. I mean, the local council and the government are really supposed to be a make-up of the people. And if I'm saying it now, if they're getting 11% increase, I want 11% as well. Do you understand? Because I don't see where they should be taking. We've got austerity measures going on at the moment. The economical climate is not great, and I really don't see why the politicians or the MPs should be taking any form of pay increase.
Is that something you agree with?
I mean, I could outrightly say it's greed, and more greed. But I will also look at it from Pastor Price's point of view. An outside body made a recommendation for an increase of 11%. That's fine, because it's a recommendation. It does not have to be accepted. And I personally believe right now, local people do not understand basically the fiscal budget, the cutting here, the putting down there. They are thinking, I've not seen any increase in my wage. Everything else is going up. And my MP, who I don't even see, is going to have another 11% put. It is going to cause real anger. And I think it's going to be a good point to vote out some of them at the next election if they take it.
Absolutely. I saw a gentleman on another programme the other night, a Conservative MP, whose basic stance on it was that it wasn't his decision to recommend an 11% pay increase, so there was no way that he was going to turn it down, which seems to me in the current climate to be a rather rash way of looking at it, and sort of extremely sort of profiteering way of looking at it. Is this something that you'd sort of...
It just sounds like the I'm all right Jack syndrome, doesn't it? And as we've sort of reiterated that, they didn't have to accept it. It doesn't have to be accepted. And that would have been very honourable. People standing outside that regime would think really, definitely highly of these people if we don't want it because the people are suffering also.
That's right. Absolutely. The bottom line is simple this. If our purse can afford 60% increase, 90% increase, give it to them. The balance is, can we afford this? And I can't see why a very honourable elected member of parliament who is on a very comfortable budget, not to mention the perks that come with the job. Yeah. Why would you want to go for this? Baffles me.
A lot of the MPs who are probably in a position to take the 11% pay increase are also sort of quite strong in the pushing of the increasing of the apprenticeship schemes in the apprenticeship job market, to the extent that there's a lot of new areas and jobs that wouldn't necessarily have put an apprenticeship scheme in place. I saw one pub in a local area advertising for an apprenticeship bar staff, paying an apprenticeship wage. I know a lot of people of the age to be going into apprenticeships are now starting to see apprenticeships as a sort of abuse of the system and a way of employers merely bringing down the national minimum wage. And I suppose, do you think there could be more controls on the apprenticeship schemes, and on the type of jobs that are able to offer apprenticeship schemes, Reverend?
Yeah, it's a difficult one in as far as employers, at the end of the day, they're in business to make money, and you don't make money until there's added value to your operation. And so the new person coming in, who may, or in the majority of cases, is not skilled and would need a lot of investment time investment. You know, the employer sort of caught between a rock and a hard place in one sense. However, in terms of exploiting the opportunity of taking on apprentices, I think the root issue is from higher up. There really ought to be a closer assessment on what really would stimulate employment opportunities amongst the youth. Because an employer will always seize the opportunity to exploit or to get produce for very little outlay. So I think the problem lies higher up in terms of what is the, you know, how do we really get our younger generation into employment, into a proper job, you know, £12,000 a year, £17,000 a year, £25,000, you know, a proper job. What's the you know, the formula for that? And I think the focus really should be there. What is that formula? And I think, as you say, employers are employers and they're businessmen at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I mean, do you think though that they maybe could be, especially on companies that are making hundreds of millions of pounds worth of profit year on year? A couple come to mind, Yorkshire Water being one. Do you think that there could be more of a, if not incentive, but an insistence of reinvestment on parts of big companies in local areas and local jobs, a sort of government insistence?
And it goes right across the board with all the large institutions and organisations. Profits are set because somebody has drawn a line in terms of our investment is X amount, and then after here is what we deem as profit. But you know, it's a redefinition of the investment levels, and I think if investment was far greater in these large organisations, profits then would follow on.
Right, we're gonna take another break now. This is Kirklees Local Television's Weekly Wind-Up. If you'd like to comment on any of the subjects that you've heard so far in the Weekly Wind-Up, Kirklees Local Television can always be contacted by email on info@kirkleeslocaltv.com and on Twitter @KirkleesLocalTV. Thank you.
Nelson Mandela. Well, what does this man really mean to the world, but particularly to me, an African Caribbean descent person? After 27 years in prison for something that you have never done, most people released from prison and put in such a powerful position would want revenge, would want an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Well, as a local pastor and the bishop of a thriving fellowship, Nelson Mandela stands out. I'm tempted to put him almost beside Jesus regarding his attitude. One, a great leader. That's a born leader. When he speaks, his word touches you. Secondly, reconciliation. How do you bring together a nation that has been set apart by apartheid, and one man incarcerated for 27 years uses his power and ability to bring the nation together? That is awesome. Only Jesus could do that. And thirdly, the power of forgiveness. Nelson Mandela truly practices what the Bible teaches, forgiveness. He could have turned the other way, be bitter against his enemies. No, he sought to forgive them. So, on a time when we were celebrating one of the greatest man who lived on earth, Nelson Mandela. You have left a legacy that every African, Caribbean descent people should be immensely proud of. And I, for sure, am willing to make sure this legacy lasts forever.
Nelson Mandela, rest in peace. I respect Nelson for the love and inspiration that he inspired his people, the unity that he's helped bring about in South Africa, but also I really respect him for doing the best that he could with what he had. So Nelson Mandela, rest in peace.
And welcome back to the final section of this week's Weekly Wind-Up. This week, my guests are Pastor Carlton Napier, Reverend Patrick Price, and Donovan Christopher. Now, this week saw Huddersfield hold the Festival of Light again in the town centre. It was on for the weekend period. Did any of you manage to get down to any of the events over the weekend?
Personally, I didn't manage to get down there. I did see the firework display, and at the time I did kind of wonder what was going on. And it was brought to my attention that it was the Festival of Lights. And I thought, well, the Festival of Lights was the Diwali festival, you know, and I needed to be a bit more educated on what Huddersfield's Festival of Lights about.
Well, basically, we've got to accept it. We are in a multicultural society, and festivals and celebrations are a big pastime for everyone. The fact that it has brought in so many people into our community is giving our community a bit of exposure, some revenues coming in. We also have to balance that against the cost. Could money be spent otherwise? A lot of people are going to ask questions. I've been there, the food is good, it mixes with a few people. Well done to the organization, that is what I can say.
Festivals, celebrations, carnivals, these are all part of the fabric of community life that are important, and it keeps goodwill alive. And we need goodwill to be preserved and to be promoted. But at the same time, we all understand the economic dilemma that we're in. And you really would have thought that there would be more consideration in really keeping things at a level that would be more palatable in the time, in relation to the times that we're in.
Absolutely, yeah. Tuesday saw the announcement that due to the increased pressure of the winter period, some ambulances are having to wait up to 30 minutes in queues at Dewsbury A&E. What I'd like to ask is, do you feel that this is a reflection purely of the increased pressure of winter, or do you feel that it might be a sign of budget cuts actually hitting home? Donovan?
I think people visit the hospital, unless they've got figures that suggest that people visit the hospital more often this time of the year, it's difficult to comment on that. But if there is waiting times at Dewsbury Hospital, then it could be down to in Dewsbury, if they're waiting, it could be down to the cutbacks kicking in now. Dewsbury's never sort of been as affluent as other parts of West Yorkshire, so to speak. And it might be one of the first places that actually feeling the pinch. It just doesn't sound
Carla, I am just about tired of hearing the winter blues every year. If it's the gritters, if it's an ambulance. We are a country in Europe that expects winter. We must plan to accommodate what is coming to us. It's an excuse, and this government needs to wake up quick and smell the coffee.
Somebody needs to be accountable somewhere, in as far as it would be interesting to know how the other local hospitals are faring, same period.
That's right.
Similar experiences. Questions to be asked.
Absolutely, yeah. Some questions to be answered as well, I think.
I'd just like to put on top of that, as I says, looking back, I thought there's always been a public service, a good public service, and customer care, and all of that was always in place as I growing up in Huddersfield. And over the years, I've seen it sort of diminishing, that public care and service that people actually get. I've seen it diminishing tragically. It's to me, Huddersfield is a shadow of the place it used to be in terms of services rendered to the people.
I do hope our politicians are listening to us and taking us very serious,
Yeah.
because the election is coming soon.
Move on to his next story. We like to finish on a bit of a lighter note on the weekly wind-up. So we'd just like to mention this weekend was Huddersfield Lions' annual Santa Dash and Reindeer Run, which was held in Huddersfield Town Centre. There was 174 runners taking part who raised around £5,000 for various charities in the local area. Were any of you passed in the town centre by a fleeing Santa?
I think by the time I got there, Santa had already gone, galloped so fast through town, but it's a worthy cause. Give it to the guys and all those who are planning. £5,000 in this harsh economic climate is a lot for charities.
But yeah, right, that's all been great today. Thank you very much to you all for your appearances. Pastor Napier,
Excellent.
Donovan, thank you, and Reverend Patrick, thank you. Well, it's all sort of been quite interesting this week. Again, if you'd like to comment on anything you've heard in the weekly wind-up, you can contact Kirklees Local Television by email on info@kirkleeslocaltv.com and on Twitter @KirkleesLocalTV. We'd hope that you've enjoyed the programme and that you'll join us next week. Thank you very much and goodbye.